Okay, right. Okay, folks, welcome back to fractions to decimals. Today's part 2. We should be looking at non-tenths, hundredths and thousands, because fractions, as we done last week in the last lesson, we're changing fractions like 4 thousandths into a decimal, 6 tenths into a decimal, 8 hundredths into a decimal. These are the easier ones to do, as we only have to move the decimal point one place or 2 places or even 3 places. Now we need to look at the more mechanical type of questions, the ones where we're going to need to use more brain power, and we use the division. So I'm calling this part 2. Okay, right. So today's worksheet is this. This is the worksheet we're going to be using for the homework. So I'm going to put this over here. I'm just going to make sure that it's focused in the camera. Give me a second. Okay. Yeah, lovely. That's beautiful. So this particular sheet is what we're going to be looking at today. So if you want to pause this part of the video and you can copy down the questions, okay, and then you can do the we'll do some of the questions now in the lesson and some in the homework part of the video. Okay, right, this is what we're going to be working on in this part of the lesson, fractions to decimals, part 2, changing non-tenths, non-hundredths and non-thousandths into decimals. We have slipped one in there as a teaser. Right, let's move this out of the way. Let's have a look at the first question. So, example number 1. Okay, the most common fraction that we come across is a half. If you're going to change 1/2 into a decimal, what is the technique for changing 1/2 into a decimal? The technique for changing 1/2 into decimal is exactly the same technique as changing 6 tenths into a decimal, the first part anyway, which is the top number divided by the bottom number. So let's go back to the basic principles and let's have a look. So a half. Let's change print. So when we read this question, it's all about reading the question carefully as well. Read. This says 1 divided by 2. 1, and the line represents divide by 2. So when we look at the fraction a half, what do we see? We see a division calculation. It is saying to us 1, the line stands for divide, 1 divided by 2. So we need to be able to read the fraction properly. Once we can read the fraction properly, we can do the question. Okay, so the first part of this reading the fraction is exactly the same as the previous week's lesson, changing tenths and hundredths into. So we've got to be able to read the question. So now let's rewrite over here. So a half is 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2. Now, if you're going to work out this calculation using what they call in school the bus stop method, okay, at the moment I'm writing my numbers like quite big. This is for the benefit of those of you learning by video, so you can see the numbers more clearly. Okay, when you do your work in your books, please try to keep your numbers inside one box. Okay, for the purpose of my demonstration, I'm going to write mine enlarged a bit so it's easy to it'll come out easy on the video. Okay, so now out of these two numbers, which number goes at the front and which number goes inside? Student, please help. Right, so 1 divided by 2. Okay, so the first number goes inside and the second number goes outside. Thank you, well done. Right, I call this the X. Okay, so the second number always goes first and the first number always goes second. So it's not because the first number is small or big. It's nothing to do with the size, it's to do with its position. The first number will go second. and the second number will go first. So you have to swap the numbers over, so we do an X. Okay, swap them. This is the technique for doing this kind of question. Please learn the technique carefully. So I'm now going to put the 2 over here, I'm going to put the 1 in here, and I'm going to decimalize the 1 straight away. Okay, we'll see why, because it's all about decimals. Okay, so the 2's gone outside, the 1 has gone inside, and let's see where we get with this. So now we have a division question. How do we read this division question? This division question reads, how many 2's go into 1? Or what's 1 divided by 2? So here, when we look at this calculation here, we read it from left to right, 1 divided by 2. But when we look at this, it's read 1 divided by 2 that way. It's just, we write it in a different format for this bus stop technique for division. So, let's do the division question now. So this part here is different than last week. Last week we were just moving decimal points, nice and easy. Dropping it down, copying the numbers down. Here we're going to have to use a bit more brain power. Okay, so I hope everybody's had their breakfast before we do these questions. Right, how many 2's go into 1? So will 2 fit into 1? Can you make a group of 2 out of 1? And the answer is no. And in the no we have a O. And my O is a 0 here. So if you say no, at the end of no you have an O, and I'll represent my O with a 0. So 2 will go into 1 no times. Now that whole 1 becomes a remainder. It moves on to the next number. That whole number there gets carried. Now we have a decimal point at the bottom. We must copy it up. Okay, so now the next question is, how many 2's will fit into 10? If you have 10 friends, you divide them into groups of 2, you will get how many groups? 5, thank you. So, we have 0.5. So a half is equivalent to 0.5. Done. So the first part of the technique is all about reading. A lot of the techniques that I'm showing you in these videos is about being able to understand the mathematics and have ownership of it. Okay? So let's quickly go back through this question again. We had the fraction of half. We read it as a half. I want you to read it differently today. I want you to read it as each individual component. So read 1, the line stands for divide by, and the 2 is just 2. So this fraction reads what? 1 divided by 2. We write it like this. 1 divided by 2. Now if we're going to do this calculation and get a decimal answer, we need to put this 1 divided by 2 in the bus stop technique that we use in schools for doing division. Now, this is the second number. The second number will always go first. This is the first number in the calculation. That will always go second. So if we think about this X orientation, do not copy the 1 down or the 2 down. It doesn't go out. We must swap the number order over. This 1 must come here and this 2 must come here. So we use the X. Okay. So now we have how many 2's go, and what we done, when we put the 1 in here, we decimalized the 1. The 1 became 1.0. So we said then how many 2's will fit into 1? If you have one friend, can you make him into a group of 2? And the answer is no. And in the word no, there is an O. There's my O. Okay, my 0. So we can't get it in. So this whole number then becomes a remainder. So we say how many 2's now go into 10? 2 will go into 10 5 times. If you have 10 friends, you divide them into groups of 2, you will have 5 groups. The decimal point gets copied up and you're done. Half is equal to 0.5. Let's do one more example and then we'll move on to the part of the video where the student has to do their own questions, and then I'll come back with some answers. Okay, that's example number 1, done. Let's do example number 2. Oops. Okay, excuse me there. Alright. I'm going to write in here 2. Example number 2. Example number 2. Let's go for something a bit more juicy that will make us think a bit more. So example number 2, we have something like, which is written on there. Good, good, good. Okay, let's try something that looks a bit hairy. 7/8. Most students are going to look at this fraction 7/8 and they're going to run for the door or the windows, open them and jump out. All I'm saying to you is, wait, don't jump out the window. Let's try to do this question in the most simplest and loveliest way. So, what do we do first? We have to read it. I want you to read the fraction. Okay. By the time you've gone through quite a few more videos, if you think this teacher's mad about reading, we're doing maths. Maths is all about reading. Reading and understanding. What does this fraction say? This fraction in the original format says 7/8. But for this exercise, how do you read it? What do we say? 7 divided by 8. Lovely. Thank you. So it says 7. The line represents divide. And the 8 is 8. So we have, so 7/8 means to us for today's exercise 7 divided by 8. 7 divided by 8. Let's write that down. Okay, 7 divided by 8 is what this fraction reads. Now we need to put it into our bus stop arrangement in terms of doing our division calculation, short division. Now let's ask the student, which number goes here? The 8. Which number goes here? 7. Well done. So what do we do? We use the x, we swap them over. So the second number always goes first. And the first number here, 7, always goes second. Excellent. What do we need to do with the 7? We need to decimalize it by putting a point at the end. So 7 point, note, note, note. You'll see in a second why I've put so many notes. Okay, here we go. So 7 divided by 8, the 8 goes at the front, the 7 goes inside. Right. How do we read this question? How do we do this question now? We have to say to ourselves, how many 8s will fit into 7? Or how many groups of 8 can you make from 7? And the answer is no. We can't do it. Because we say no, at the end of the no we have an O. Here's the O. 8 will not fit into 7. I cannot make a group of 8 from 7. So we say no. At the end of a no we have an O. So put 0 there. Now you must copy the point up. Copy it up. And the 7 gets carried, the whole 7 gets carried onto the next number. Don't worry that you got a big number here. It'll all come out in the wash. How many 8s now go into 70? So when we're looking at an 8 times table, so 8 times by what is close to 70, because 70 itself is not in the 8 times table. 8 times by, student has just said 8. Okay, what is 8 times by 8? 64. So we put the 64 underneath. So we started with 70. 8 will go into 78 times. So you can make 8 groups of 8 friends from 70 people. And then how much will you have left over? We will have 6 left over. Okay. So now we say how many 8s will go into 60. So 60 is not in the 8 times table, so it won't go exactly. So what number below 60 is in the 8 times table? Think about your 8 times table. 8 times by 7. Excellent. 8 times by 7 is 56. So now the remainder is now come down to 4. So the 4 gets onto the next number. This is the remainder moving on. How many 8s now go into 40? 5 exactly. And we're done. So what looked like a really hairy question, oh, this looks really terrible. It translates into top number divided by bottom number. 7 divided by 8. Second number goes first. First number goes second. We decimalize it and we do short division using the bus stop techniques. Okay, I hope you found this technique useful and good. Now you're going to let the students go on to some questions. I want you to do the following questions, please, those students who are following the video. Okay, so if you can, question number 2, changing 2/5. Okay, question number 10, 2/25. Okay, and then we have question number 7, which is 7/20. Okay, so we got 1/25, 1/20 fraction, 1/5 to the half, then straightforward. Okay, and we do one more. Okay, no, that should be enough. So folks, join us back in part 2 of this video. We will go through these particular answers on these questions. I think we should do just one more for good measure, number 11, and replace that with another question. Okay, right, so question number 2, 2/5, 2/25, 7/20, 11/30, sorry, number 11 is 3/50. Please come back in the second video to see how the student has got on and how we're going to go through those answers. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please come back in the second part.